Okay, welcome to the video. SIG Guy here. This is going to be an installation video, and the product we're going to be installing today is the new trigger from Armory. This is their dual adjustable trigger for the P322, made of all aluminum. Comes in two different colors, black or red. And obviously we're going to install it in one of SIG's newest pistols, the 22 caliber P322. So with that, let's get started. So it is pretty nice that SIG has provided us with a lot of goodies for this pistol, and I'm going to go over them in my other review. But they did give us two different trigger shoes, a flat one and a curved one. Okay, so that way you can switch back and forth, or everybody has their own personal preference. So it's really neat that they provided that for us. The only problem is they are plastic, so it does give the trigger pull a real plastic feel to it. With the Armory aluminum trigger, it takes care of all of that, as well as gets rid of a lot of the slop in the trigger itself. So as always, when we're working on firearms, we're going to verify we're working on a safe and clear firearm. So we're going to physically and visually check, make sure there's no round in the chamber, no magazine, check our breech face, look away, do the same thing again, chamber, magazine, breech face. We're working on a clear and safe firearm. So with the muzzle in a safe direction, just kind of demonstrate our trigger. I mean, there's a lot of pre-travel here, and if you're familiar with like the 320, say, when you're pulling your trigger really hard, you can feel the trigger bar like bending and flexing. It's kind of that mushy feeling to it. There's no really defined wall or anything here. So it's just a really cheap, plastic, squishy feeling trigger. Okay, I understand it's 22 and the price point, you get what you pay for, so not knocking it at all. I actually really like this pistol. It's real fun to shoot. And it is very clever the way SIG did a lot of things with this one little pistol. So again, just a lot of slop trigger mush. You know, it's got a good positive firing because it's actually hammer fired, not striker fired, which is really cool. Anyway, so we'll rack our slide with our trigger to the rear. We got a real long reset, real kind of mushy reset, and it kind of like clunks into place, and then right against wherever the wall is. So just kind of a demonstration of where this trigger is at, and then we'll demonstrate the Armory one once we get it installed. So let's do that next. So first we'll disassemble, and it's kind of similar to all the other ones. It's kind of a little bit backwards though. Okay, it does have a takedown lever, which we're going to rotate up on this one. Make sure it's all the way up and forward, not in the halfway position like that, because that actually will prevent things from happening. So just make sure it's all the way forward. Okay. We're going to bring our slide to the rear, and we're going to kind of like unhook it and bring it forward and up and forward, okay? So all the way to the rear, kind of lift it up and slide it forward just like that. Okay, I'll do that one more time. Make sure that we're on camera. See how my thing's not all the way forward? Got to make sure it's all the way forward for this to work, okay? So better point of view here. We're going to go back, lift it up, and then ride it forward, okay? Our guide rod spring is captured on there, and then when we're gonna, this comes with a threaded barrel, which I'll go over in the review. My suppressor should be here any day for this. That's when I'll do the review, but we got a thread protector on here. See, it's not all the way forward. You gotta always make sure that's all the way forward. So you got this thread protector on here for the threaded barrel. SIG has actually provided us with the adapter that will screw onto there and allow you to thread a suppressor on there. So that's pretty cool. Another awesome little thing that they included in this pistol. So again, all the way back, lift up and off. That's how we remove the upper from the lower. And actually you can see how the barrel is actually fixed to the lower. Okay, it doesn't unlock and drop like most of our other pistols. It's really fixed in there. So again, I don't want to give too much away in this video, but this thing is very reliable no matter what kind of 22 ammo you're running through it, based upon a lot of the design features, which we'll go over in the review video. So that's how we remove our upper. Okay, and then our trigger, when we take that out of there, it's just kind of hooked on there with the plastic the way it's molded. It's a lot easier to get out of here with the hammer portion forward. Okay, so I'm going to put my finger over the hammer, just like your AR. You don't want to release the hammer and have it smash forward because you can break things. Side note, when your slide is on, it is perfectly fine to dry fire this you're not going to ruin anything at all. But with the slide off, you're going to definitely want to put your finger over the hammer here, and we'll pull. Actually, make sure your takedown lever is down because it won't let you pull your trigger back. And then we're going to release our hammer and ride it forward. Okay. What that does is it puts our trigger a little bit more rearward, so we got a little bit more room here in the front. To remove our plastic trigger shoe from the trigger itself, very simple. All we're going to do is we're going to push forward on the bottom portion of it. It just kind of clips around the inside metal portion, okay? So we'll push that forward just like that. Kind of like unlocks it, releases it. We're going to pull down, rotate it around, wiggle it, and get it to come out of there. So that's what our trigger shoe looks like. No screws or anything, nothing to mechanically hold it on there other than the molding itself. Same thing with our flat one. The procedure to put it back in, just the opposite. Basically put that metal portion in between the trigger just like that, get it started. We're going to kind of rotate it around while we're pushing up at the same time. We're going to push up and back and click it right into place. Okay, so that's how you basically change the trigger shoes out. The flat one's a little bit trickier because it's a little bit longer, but the procedure is exactly the same. So we'll rotate that out of there. We'll get that out of there like that. And then you can see our trigger itself is just a piece of metal, two little spades like hanging down. And they're a little unique design there. It allows for the Armory Craft one with these two screws. Once you run those screws in there, that's what attaches this and keeps it firmly in place. Let's talk about the trigger itself, the replacement Armory Craft dual adjustable trigger. I don't know if this is trigger number 17 or 18, but Armory Craft is definitely on their game when it comes to SIG Sauer triggers. So there is nobody that has more triggers for the SIG Sauers than Armory Craft. And I'm loving how every single one of them, pretty much, except the 365, obviously, they're coming up with ways to make these adjustable. So on this one here, it's a pretty unique design. And when you first get the trigger, it's going to make you feel really stupid. It's got one hole, okay, right through the middle there. All right, and both adjustment screws go in that same hole. So when you first take it out of the box, you're like, okay, I see the one screw. Where's the other one? Well, there's your answer, okay? So it's got the unique design with the one hole and two screws go in there. We have a longer screw and a shorter screw. The shorter screw is your over travel, and the longer screw is your pre-travel, okay? And I have both my screws out here, which are the very long ones, and you got two of those as well. So there's no way to mix up any of these screws. They're all different lengths. These ones secure the trigger to the trigger shoe to the trigger. This is your over travel. This is your pre-travel, okay? And you'll understand why one's longer than the other once we put this in the pistol, okay? We have our serrations on the front face here. Nice grippy serrations. Obviously that's very important versus our rounded plastic slippery. I mean, I understand to keep the price down they make a cheap trigger, but it's all about upgrades. Why are we upgrading? Well, to make it perform a lot better, right? It's wider than our flat trigger here. This is your standard looking SIG flat face trigger. It got pretty rounded here on the edges, which takes up a lot of the flatness going across. Plus it's rounded like that, even though it's a flat face trigger, okay? Where this one's a lot wider all the way across with your serrations, a lot more surface area for your finger, and then that's going to allow for a lot more consistent finger placement as well, okay? Aluminum versus plastic, obviously, it's going to get rid of that plasticky, spongy trigger sensation that you get with your stock plastic triggers by taking up a lot of that pre-travel out and all of the over-travel out, okay? So because we're reducing the amount of pre-travel and over-travel, our trigger movement is actually decreased, so you got basically a shorter trigger in your 322. Basically, it eliminates that over-travel, so say it's like 1.5 millimeters of over-travel, and then the 1.5 millimeters coming back forward from that reduced amount, which is 3 millimeters total. You're removing that much just from the over travel, and then you have even more than that for the pre-travel. The pre-travel is pretty far. That's why you have a longer screw for your pre-travel adjustment, because there's so much pre-travel in this pistol. You need a longer screw. Anyway, so all that extra movement that is eliminated shortens the trigger movement itself, and it makes it just a much more desirable trigger. not only that, but you gotta admit, this looks pretty cool. So let's install our trigger. As you can see, all the screws are removed. Pre-travel, over travel, and the ones that secure it to the trigger itself. I have not cleaned or degreased any of these, and I'm not gonna apply Loctite yet either, because we're gonna test fit everything. Notice that your screws are all pre-installed for you. That means that the threading is perfectly fine on them, so that way if you strip or damage the threading in whatever way, that is on you, that is not on Armory Craft, and it's certainly not on me. As always, it's recommended that a gunsmith do any work to your firearm, so stuff like that doesn't happen to begin with. So, alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install my pre-travel screw, or excuse me, my over-travel screw. We're going to put that into our trigger shoe itself. I'm going to run it all the way in until I start to see it coming out the back. And I know where mine needs to be. So that's flush right there. I'm going to go about 3/4 of a turn. And that's pretty much where I know I'm going to want mine. But we'll over adjust it for you so you can kind of see what happens. So what I do is I actually reinstall my upper. Make sure this is all the way up. And then if your hammer is in the up position, we're going to need to pull it down, okay? Make sure that's all the way forward and up. Put on our upper, rotate that, pull our trigger, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just put this on here. We're not going to put it on permanently or anything. We're just kind of testing it out. What I'm doing is I'm holding it up and backwards with my fingers so it doesn't fall off. I'm going to rack my slide, okay? And I'm going to test to see if it works. Muzzle's in the safe direction. We already know we're clear. It works fine, okay? So, at this point, if you over-adjusted it, it's not going to fire, okay? So you need to back that screw out. So what I'm going to do to demonstrate is I will over-adjust this. I'm going a little bit more, about one turn. You can see it's sticking out quite a bit more now. We'll put this back on here. Rack our slide. You see it doesn't fire. We're over-adjusted. So, we'll get this off of here. We'll back that out to where I had it. Put that back on. Triggers to the rear is a lot easier to put on and off. Rack our slide. Holding it up and backwards. That's where I want mine. Okay, so we're going to remove that, and then we're going to put in our pre-travel screw, which is the longer of the two. We're going to do this the same way. So once I get mine started, I already know that mine goes in 6.5 turns roughly, and that's kind of where I want it. Yours may be different. Every gun's going to be different. So basically run it in. I wouldn't run it in all the way. I'll show you here in a second what it looks like. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. You see how much that sticks out the front there. There's quite a bit of pre-travel on the 322. Okay? So we're going to put that up in here. Just like that. Rack our slide. And you can see, if there is a wall, it's going to be like right there, okay? We'll pull it, we're going to rack our slide, and we're going to make sure it resets, okay? If it's not going to reset, you have that sticking out way too far. It's not allowing the trigger to go forward enough, okay, to reset, so you need to run it in a little bit, okay? See, my over travel needs to probably come out just a hair, or go in just a hair, because that one was on the hairy edge. Okay, so that's how we're going to adjust our pre-travel and over-travel. Once you feel very comfortable with that, I wouldn't hesitate to put these in there. Okay, get it all mounted in there like it would be. Cycle it a few times, make sure everything works properly. And if it works properly at that time, then what we're going to do is we're going to disassemble everything, clean everything, Loctite everything, and put it all back together. Now that we had our everything assembled the way it's going to be, we're going to actually remove them 2 screws so we can remove our shoe from our trigger. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to count the amount of revolutions it takes to remove our screws. Okay, like I said, mine was 6.5. I was actually just playing around with it a little bit. I think I took one more revolution out of it, so 5.5 is what I'm going to start when I go back together. So we'll remove our screws, counting how many turns it takes to remove them. Okay. And then what we're going to do is get a paper towel. We're going to get some alcohol. We're going to clean our screws and then clean the thread holes the best we can. So I'll put a little bit of alcohol on my rag here. And I'll take my screws. These are usually covered in oil to keep them from rusting, and then the machining process and threading them, lubrication. We want all that out of there so our Loctite does a better job at holding those secure. We're going to do all 4 screws. Okay, see all the residue that's on the screws. Just like that. Okay. And then the thread holes here, we can get a Q-tip. We can get those the best we can, and possibly if we can remove most of this cotton from here, that'll help. Yeah, the holes are still a little bit smaller than our cotton, so the best you can, just get something in there and try to clean those out. Maybe pour some alcohol on there and then blow it out with some compressed air or whatever. There shouldn't really be much oil on these anyway because they've been coated after the machining process. So what we'll do next is we will take our blue Loctite. 242 is what I use. You don't want to use red Loctite because that's going to permanently lock these screws in there, and then you're going to be screwed when you try to get them out. So we're going to take our shorter of the two, our pre-travel screw. Going to put a little bit of Loctite on that. You want to make sure you shake up your Loctite. Sometimes it separates depending on how long it's been sitting on your shelf. I just used this the other day, so I know I'm good to go. And I'll just take a little bit of Loctite, put a little dab on there. Oops. Try that again. Put a little dab on there. And then we're going to run that in. You got plenty of time, so you don't have to race to do this. It's not going to set up right away. But we want to be quick enough to where it doesn't start setting up and then we're breaking it loose by making adjustments, okay? So I have my pre-travel in there pretty close to where I think it needs to be. We're going to do this, or over-travel, I keep confusing the two. My pre-travel screw, I'll put some Loctite on that. And we'll run that in. I'm going to do 5.5 this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. And actually come out a little bit. And I'll just take and get the excess off of here. And then I'll go even as far as putting Loctite on these. And I'll get these started. I can basically go in until I start seeing it coming into the channel there, and I'll back it out a little bit. I'll do the same for this other one. Put that in there just like that. And then we are going to install this up in here like this. And then we'll give it a couple tests here. Make sure it works properly. And at this time, I'm going to probably take some pre-travel out of it. We'll run that in. Or excuse me, we're going to run it out. a little bit. Test that again. I can feel it kind of being lazy on the reset, so I'm right on that hairy edge, and I don't really want mine on the hairy edge anyway. It's a 22, so I'm gonna run mine in probably about a half. Put this back up in there. And that's pretty much where I'm going to leave mine, okay? So at this point here, we're going to make sure that that's slid all the way up in there. And we'll run in these screws here. Pretty long screws. We're going to run them in till they're all the way flush on both sides. As you can see, I have both of mine countersunk on both sides. And that's where they're going to need to be. And then we're going to wipe off the excess blue Loctite before that sets up. Get everything nice and clean. And then what we're going to do is we're going to exercise the trigger a few times to make sure that it's operating properly. Okay, which it is. When we put these screws in here, it's actually going to pull that trigger tighter, the trigger shoe tighter against the trigger. So if you're on the hairy edge with your pre-travel and over-travel, it might affect that, okay? So basically, you want to do this procedure as quick as possible because the Loctite's setting up, you know, every second that you're messing around with it. So if you got to remove all of this to back out that over-travel screw a little bit, you have time to do that. So once everything is where it needs to be, basically we're going to let this set overnight, at least 24 hours, let that blue Loctite set up, and then we'll be able to enjoy our 322 and the new Armory Craft dual adjustable trigger. And there you go. There you have it. That's how you install the Armory Craft dual adjustable all aluminum P322 trigger in your SIG Sauer P322. And I tell you what a difference. Huge difference. Inexpensive pistol, came with a plastic trigger. It felt like a plastic gun, really mushy, and wasn't very nice at all. And then a relatively inexpensive upgrade has completely changed this thing. So as you can see, we've removed like all of our pre-travel. I could actually add some probably to it. But you can see our adjustment screw up underneath there, how it interacts with the frame. It's holding your trigger back, removing that pre-travel, and then we got it to go off. The opposite is true on the over-travel screw. It prevents it from going any further back than it has to. And what that's going to do is just reduce your trigger movement, all right? Lessen it, make it shorter trigger. Excellent upgrade. Highly recommend. I really like this pistol. I keep knocking it because of the price point or whatever, but SIG has done an amazing job with this 22, and there are so many features, added into this, which I'll go over in my review video once I get my suppressor. I know there's other videos out there, but I want to kind of go over everything as well. Anyway, these triggers, as well as the red and the black, they are available on the website, sigguy.com. It does come with an Allen wrench for your little screws. All you need is your blue Loctite, and you're all set to go. So if you haven't been to sigguy.com lately, I'm constantly adding as much stuff to it as possible. I just got a bunch of barrels in, XL threaded barrels. I think they're still available on the website. Optics, ton of optics on there. Lights and lasers, all different manufacturers, from cheap to expensive. Kind of make everybody happy. And then the coolest thing on the website is the new feature, notify me when back in stock. My phone has been blown up like crazy since I've added that last week. So that way I didn't got to write your name down and try to remember. Half the time I write them on my dry erase board, and then I'll brush up against it and smear all the information off of there. So this way, as soon as I add it to the website, boom, you get an email. You can jump on there real quick, grab it. That is an awesome feature. I'm so glad that I put that on there. Also, there should be a subscribe button right down here. If you really enjoy this type of content and you find it helpful, please subscribe to my channel. As always, I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you very much, and have a great day.